Hello and welcome to Studio Classroom on the Air. My name is Anne-Marie and I think today is a great day to learn something new.
So let's do that together. My name is Gabe and we've got a very thought-provoking lesson today.
Oh, thought-provoking. That's a great phrase. It means that something makes you think hard about or consider something. What's so thought-provoking about today's lesson, Gabe?
Well, today is really going to make us think because we're exploring the question, what makes a sport a sport?
Oh, good question. I have an idea. Let's share our opinions now and then see if they change by the end of our lesson. What do you think? What makes a sport a sport?
Well, I think that it should involve some kind of physical activity, and it needs to involve competition of some kind. So physical activity and competition will probably be a pretty good sport. Anne-Marie, what do you think?
Well, in my opinion, for something to be considered a sport, it has to be something that requires physical training and is an action that requires physical movement.
Okay, so we both agree on at least the physical aspect.
Yes.
It has to be pretty physical, involving your whole body and muscles and everything. What do you think, friends? Get ready to hear both sides of the argument. In today's article,
Are esports really a sport? Get ready for a thought-provoking lesson, friends.
Let's get started with the first reading of the day.
Are esports really a sport? When is a sport really a sport? Lucy and Peter play sports and enjoy watching sports competitions. They followed the Olympics last July and have been watching the Winter Universiade 2021 this month. Peter also loves to play video games and watches competitive video gaming or esports on TV. Peter feels that esports should be considered a real sport, while Lucy isn't so sure.
Hey, Lucy, I'm done playing virtual regatta for now. Our team is ahead.
Good for you! Are you practicing for real sailing on a real ocean?
Very funny. This is a real sport.
Hello everyone, welcome to Language Lab. I'm Jack. 我们先来看 competition 这个名词，意思是竞赛、比赛。比如 The competition for the new job opening at our company is stiff. 我们公司最近的新职缺竞争很激烈。或者是 Evan is busy preparing for the biking competition that will be held next month.Evan 忙着准备下个月要举行的自行车比赛。再看一个例句 What kind of competitions do you enjoy watching? 你喜欢看哪一种比赛呢？接着来看 competition 的形容词 competitive， 意思是有竞争力的。譬如 One of the most competitive jobs in the world right now is engineering. 现今最具竞争力的一个工作是工程师。Competitive 也有好竞争的或是好胜的意思。譬如 Sally is extremely competitive at everything she does, so she doesn't have many friends. Sally 在每件事情上都很好强，所以朋友不多。Competitive 也指在价格或服务上具有竞争力。例如The rates at that hotel are very competitive, so Sandy wants to stay there on her vacation. 那家饭店的房价非常具有竞争力，所以 Sandy 度假的时候想要住在那里。Okay, let's get back to our teachers.
All right, thank you so much, Jack. Friends, are you ready to have a discussion today? We are going to talk about if you think esports can be considered a sport or not. So put on your thinking caps. Let's get started. When is a sport really a sport? Lucy and Peter play sports and enjoy watching sports competitions. Okay, so we are talking about two characters today, Lucy and Peter. They're having a discussion together.
That's right, and we have the question here, when is a sport really a sport? That makes us think of the question, what makes something something else? So what makes something a sport? And Maria and I did discuss a little earlier about what we think makes a sport a sport. They should involve some kind of physical activity or physical training, right? And they're going to have this discussion here. But you can replace that word sport with something else. What makes a joke and not a lie? Some people have that question. Have you ever thought about that, Anne-Marie? If someone says something and you know they're joking, if they can explain after 10 seconds or so that it was a joke. Otherwise, if they lie to people and they don't say it's a joke, people might believe them and it's a lie, right?
Well, you know what I've heard before, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard people say there's a little bit of truth in every joke.
In every joke, right? Right? Well, maybe that's true. What do you think about that, friends? You know, this also reminds me of that lesson about memes that we had. What makes a meme a meme? Well, that lesson said pretty clearly it's only a meme when it becomes widely spread. That means it's spread to a lot of different kinds of social media. What makes a meme a meme? What makes a sport a sport? What makes something a sport? Well, we continue here. Lucy and Peter, they followed the Olympics last July and have been watching the Winter Universiade 2021 this month. Now, Anne-Marie, in that sentence, do you usually refer to a month from this same year as last or this past?
I usually say this past, personally, although this is a correct way to use that as well.
Yeah.
If you were to say to me last July, I automatically would think of last year.
Yeah, 2020.
Right.
July 2020. Now, we know from the context that it can't be talking about July 2020 because the Olympics actually happened this year in 2021. So we know that this means from this last year. However, I would usually use the word this. I would put the word this in front of last or say this past. And our author does the same thing later in our lesson, okay? She'll say this past summer. But how does our lesson continue right here?
We read on, Peter also loves to play video games and watches competitive video gaming or esports on TV. Peter feels that esports should be considered a real sport, while Lucy isn't so sure.
Now, the idea of video games, it used to be video games just referred to what you played with your TV screen, okay? Some kind of console like Nintendo or Sega or PlayStation or something like that you hook up to your TV. Now there's so many different kinds of video games, and I think that we can even refer to computer games, games that you play solely on the computer. We can refer to those as video games as well.
That's right. PC gaming is pretty popular. There's also cell phone games. Some people may consider what they play on their cell phone to be a video game as well. Lots of different kinds of video games. All right. Peter says, "Hey, Lucy, I'm done playing virtual regatta for now. Our team is ahead." Lucy says, "Good for you. Are you practicing for real sailing on a real ocean?" Is Lucy making a joke here?
I think she might be we would say she's giving Peter a hard time because she knows that virtual regatta is not for real sailing. It's not real sailing like you see in this picture. Real sailing seems to me like it could be adventurous, but also kind of scary, right?
Yeah, I've been sailing before. I was always a little bit afraid, especially when the boat tipped over a little bit like that. And we see that Peter, he answers Lucy here by saying, "Very funny. This is a real sport."
Okay.
Well, sounds like Peter is very sure.
He's very sure that it's a real sport, and he understands that Lucy was kind of joking, kind of giving him a hard time because he says, "very funny." Okay, he understands what she means here. We do have more to learn from their conversation later, but right now, let's go learn about a sport-related phrase in today's Info Cloud.
Welcome to InfoCloud, everyone. Do you like sports?
I do. Yes, I do like sports, especially if my team is winning.
I think everyone wants their team to win, Andrea. But once I was watching a tennis match, and the person who lost smashed their racket on the ground.
Oh my, okay, well, it sounds like that person was a sore loser.
Someone who is a sore loser has a bad attitude. They don't show good sportsmanship.
That's right. Now, when I was young, I was taught that whether I win or lose, I should always shake the other person's hand and say, good game.
So why are some people sore losers?
Well, there can be a lot of pressure in sports. Maybe they or their coaches have high expectations.
Or maybe the athlete is still a little immature. We might also call them a poor sport.
So, Rex, if we can have a sore loser, can we also have a sore winner?
Yes, we can. That's someone who gloats or boasts about his victory. It's also not very kind or gracious.
Now that reminds me of another phrase I learned when I was young. It's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. That's a great attitude to have in many areas of life.
在运动场上，如果选手输了之后发脾气，他可能会被批评没有运动家精神、没有风度等等。你也可以用英文说他是 sore loser， 输不起的人。sore 有发怒的含义 ，loser 是输家 ，sore loser 就是被激怒的输家。另外一个类似的用语是 poor sport， 没有运动家精神的人。或是没风度的输家，运动家精神就是 sportsmanship。最后，如果有人赢了之后开始大放厥词、自夸自擂，你也可以说他是 sore winner， 没风度的赢家。这就是今天的 Info Cloud， 我们下次新专见。
Studio Classroom is on the air.
Welcome back to Studio Classroom, friends. I have a quiz for you.
Uh-oh.
And it is very important that you keep your magazines closed for this quiz. This sentence is from our next section.
The next section.
Yes, I'm going to read a sentence, and I'm going to have a blank there, and you need to guess which word will be there later.
Okay, go ahead, Anne-Marie. What is the sentence?
Are you ready? 5 blank were included, and sailing was one of them.
Kittens.
Sailing was one of the kittens?
I was just thinking about kittens. Now, hold on a second. Our lesson is about sports and esports. So 5 blank were included. Sailing was one of them.
Yes.
I'm guessing it's esports.
Oh, okay. Well, let's find out the correct answer in the next part of our lesson.
Are esports really a sport?
How can you say that? You're sitting on the sofa in our living room. Sports means actual movement and action. When you practice a real sport, you need to go out and do it.
Hey, this past summer, the Olympic Games included the Olympic Virtual Series. 5 virtual sports were included, and sailing was one of them.
I know, but sailing on a screen isn't really sailing. Real athletes train hard and are admired for their physical performances. The honor they receive is an acknowledgement of their abilities.
I appreciate that. I know in video games like Dota 2 that there is no physical running, but just because it's different doesn't mean those players aren't athletes.
Alright， 来看 admire 这个动词，意思是欣赏、钦佩。譬如 ，People who make a lot of money are usually admired, but it is really what kind of person they are that matters. 赚很多钱的人通常都会受到众人的欣赏，但是其实他们是怎样的人才是最重要的。或者是 The entire 7th grade class admires Brendan for his leadership ability. 全部7年级班的学生都很佩服 Brendan 的领导能力。再举一个例句 All of the juniors admire their chemistry teacher because she makes the subject matter easy to understand and remember. 所有大3的学生都很敬佩他们的化学老师，因为他把化学教得容易理解又好记。最后我们来看 honor 这个名词，意思是荣誉或是名誉。譬如 The winning baseball team received many honors when they returned home from the international competition. 这支棒球队从国际性比赛凯旋归国时获颁许多的荣誉。或者是 Please give Miss Weber the honor she deserves. 请给 Weber 老师应得的尊荣吧。再看一句 Because it was her birthday, Miriam was offered the seat of honor at the restaurant. 因为是 Miriam 的生日，大家让她坐在餐厅的尊荣座位。Okay, let's get back to our teachers.
Okay, thank you, Jack. I really admire the way you shared those vocabulary words with us. Let's continue reading about this conversation that Lucy and Peter are having. Right before the break, Peter said, very funny, this is a real sport. And how does Lucy answer him?
How can you say that? And we love that question. How can you say that? You use this question to express surprise at what somebody says or thinks about something.
And that's right. Here's an example. Maybe you're talking to a friend about another friend, and you say, oh, he made me so mad. I don't even want to be friends with him anymore. Maybe you tell your friend, how can you say that? You've been friends for such a long time. It's kind of a way to show that you're surprised that someone is even thinking that.
Exactly. So we usually use this in response to something that somebody says that may be a little extreme, okay? So how can you say that? Maybe think of a situation where you can use this question today. Well, we read, you are sitting on the sofa in our living room. Sports mean actual movement and action. Now, when I read that first sentence, you're sitting on the sofa in our living room, you know what I thought about?
Sitting on the sofa. Watching TV?
Yes, watching TV. I thought about couch potatoes.
Ah, couch potatoes. Are you a couch potato, friends?
Yeah, well, sometimes I am a couch potato, but I guess a couch potato is someone who often or frequently just likes to sit in front of the TV, maybe eating popcorn or another snack, maybe playing video games, but really just not doing very much, and they do it for a long time.
That's right. Well, dropping down a few lines to Lucy's line here, she says, but sailing on a screen isn't really sailing. Real athletes train hard and are admired for their physical performances. Now, that word train stood out to me here because it makes me think that is something physical that you have to do, right?
Yeah, that's something very physical, okay? Well, Peter says, I appreciate that. I know in video games like Dota 2 that there is no physical running, but just because it's different doesn't mean those players aren't athletes, okay? So he considers these esports players athletes. And I like the sentence pattern he used here. Just because one thing doesn't mean something else. Here's another example. Just because she's laughing doesn't mean that she liked you making fun of her. Sometimes people laugh maybe because they feel uncomfortable or awkward as well.
That's a good point. Well, friends, we saw the word athlete a few times in this section. Let's talk a little bit more about that word in today's skit.
I'm not very good at sports, but everyone else in my family is an athlete.
Oh, really?
Yes. My brother Joe is on the high school baseball team.
Is he a good player?
Oh, yes. He's a very skillful player. And my sister, Rachel, is a skater. She has won many skating contests.
So she's an athlete too.
Oh, yes. And my brother is on the basketball team. He can run and jump and shoot. Oh, he's an athlete too. Everyone in my family is good at sports. They are all very good athletes. They're always competing.
So, what do you do?
I watch a lot of sports.
Oh.
Lucy and Peter play sports and enjoy watching sports competitions. They followed the Olympics last July and have been watching the Winter Universiade 2021 this month. Peter also loves to play video games and watches competitive video gaming or esports on TV. Peter feels that esports should be considered a real sport, while Lucy isn't so sure.
Hey, Lucy, I'm done playing virtual regatta for now. Our team is ahead.
Good for you! Are you practicing for real sailing on a real ocean?
Very funny. This is a real sport.
How can you say that? You're sitting on the sofa in our living room. Sports means actual movement and action. When you practice a real sport, you need to go out and do it.
Hey, this past summer, the Olympic Games included the Olympic Virtual Series. 5 virtual sports were included, and sailing was one of them.
I know, but sailing on a screen isn't really sailing. Real athletes train hard and are admired for their physical performances. The honor they receive is an acknowledgement of their abilities.
I appreciate that. I know in video games like Dota 2 that there is no physical running, but just because it's different doesn't mean those players aren't athletes.
Well, friends, we do have more to talk about if esports is a sport or not. But it has me wondering about a question right now, and I want to ask you, Gabe. What is your favorite sport?
Ultimate Frisbee.
Ultimate Frisbee.
Love Frisbee. It's not just throwing a Frisbee back and forth to your friends. That's pretty fun too. That can be relaxing. It does take skill to learn how to throw a Frisbee in different ways. Ultimate Frisbee is a team sport, and it's kind of like on a soccer field, or you can think of it in that way. You have to get the Frisbee past a certain point to get a point. Or past a line to get a point. I think it's a great game. I've talked about it here on the program before, but it's been a while, and I'm always excited to talk about it again. If you haven't tried it, friends, get some friends together, learn how to play Ultimate Frisbee. What about you?
Well, my favorite sport would have to be hockey.
Oh, that's violent.
It is kind of a violent sport. That's one reason I like it, because it's so fast-paced and so much happens. When I'm watching basketball or baseball, sometimes I get a little bit bored.
Especially baseball.
Yes, especially
Sorry, guys.
baseball. But with hockey, there's always something going on, something to watch.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, friends, what about you? What is your favorite sport? If it's baseball, please forgive me. I do think that baseball is kind of fun to watch sometimes, too. It's great to go to live, events with your friends. However, we do have more to learn about esports and if they are really a sport next time right here on
Studio Classroom.
That's a lifetime.